Hey everyone, my name is Jake, and welcome to another episode of Off Timin. So on this show, we discuss some of our favorite bands and artists, not named the Beach Boys. And I'm really excited for today's episode because we're going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite groups, ABBA, and ranking their 9 studio albums from our least favorite to our favorite. So I've been super into ABBA for about 4 years now. I've always known some of their hits, like Dancing Queen and SOS. But it wasn't until I started listening to more of their songs and albums that I really started to realize how amazing they really are. I think Benny and Bjorn are two of the most talented pop songwriters and producers of all time. It's honestly incredible how many great songs they wrote in the span of less than a decade. And I also think that Agnetha and Frida are two of the most talented singers of all time. I think their vocals are just incredible, and they really elevate the group's songs to an even higher level. So I do feel that ABBA's music, even though it is beloved by millions of people worldwide, I still think that their albums deserve a bit more recognition and attention than they get today. Which is why I thought it would be fun to do this episode and highlight both the group's hits as well as some of their material that maybe gets a bit overlooked or forgotten by the general public. So, joining me for today's episode, I have my good friend Matt, who has been a part of the Good Timin' podcast with me from the very beginning of the show. Matt is relatively new to the ABBA catalog outside of their hits, and just recently listened to all of their studio albums for the first time in preparation for this episode. So I think it's going to be really interesting to hear how our perspectives and rankings of the group's albums compare. So, before we begin, Matt, do you want to share any general thoughts on ABBA or your prior knowledge of the group before doing this episode?
Sure. So, my dad definitely knew the hits. My dad really liked them. So, my dad's originally from Brazil, and they were pretty popular in Brazil. I think they were popular pretty much all over the world. But I do agree with you. I think Benny and Bjorn, amazing songwriters. I do have a great appreciation for Swedish pop songwriters. In general, I'm a big Max Martin fan. I think he's one of the greatest songwriters ever. I do agree that the vocals, what are their names, Frida and Agnetha?
Yep.
They're amazing too. I agree. And it's actually really interesting listening to some of the albums, honestly, because like I was always kind of under the impression that ABBA was more of like a greatest hits band. Like at least that's I know how they've often been written about in critic books. But I also think they never really got a fair shake from critics in the 70s because what was loved by critics in the 70s? Rock. This is not rock. And I know your best friend Christ God never liked them. Surprise, surprise, right? But honestly, like listening to their stuff, especially like what's really kind of cool about ABBA is I think their albums kind of get better as they go along. I don't think they really have anything that I listened to that I thought, oh my God, this is awful. Like everything is definitely listenable, but as they go along, they really get pretty complex and there's a lot of melancholy in it. There's like very like some cool synth pop work. I was very pleasantly surprised actually. Again, I'm still very new to the catalog, so I don't have like an overwhelming amount of probably things to say about them, but I was very impressed with what I did listen to, and I'm definitely looking forward to really digesting the material more, through repeated listens and everything.
All right. So we're now going to get into our album rankings. So how this works is we're each going to go through our rankings album by album. So we'll start with our least favorite ABBA album, and we'll work our way up to our favorite. And then we'll each share our thoughts on the album and why we ranked it where we did. Also, at the very end of the episode, we're going to do a mini greatest hits draft, where both me and Matt will select 10 songs each that we feel best represent the ABBA catalog to new listeners. And then we'll arrange them into a 20-song greatest hits album, which I think is going to be a lot of fun. So, Matt, do you want to kick off the ranking and share your ninth and least favorite ABBA album?
Probably my least favorite is the first one, Ring Ring. Not a bad listen, but definitely not really what I was expecting. It's very folky, which is kind of interesting, but not really what I expected from ABBA. But it's definitely cool to see where they started. I like Ring Ring. I like Another Town, Another Train. Again, not a bad listen. It's just not really what I was expecting from them. I think they were still trying to find their sound. It's definitely a bit folkier than I was expecting, which is interesting. But yeah, just not really what I came to expect from ABBA, but not a bad start. So that's my number nine.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with everything you said about that album. Obviously, I'll get more into it when I get to it on my ranking. But yeah, it's a very, like you said, very folk influenced, a very Swedish sounding album for sure. But it's definitely like kind of like it's an interesting starting point, for them. And I don't think it's a bad debut by any means. There's some really enjoyable songs on there. So, but I'll get to that one when I get to it. The ninth album for me, my least favorite ABBA album, I have to go with Voyage from 2021. So this was the band's ninth and final studio album, and it was their first in nearly 40 years. At the time that this album was released, I was already pretty into ABBA. So I was really curious to see how this would sound. Unfortunately, though, I have to say I was pretty disappointed overall. And it hasn't really grown on me much since then. My biggest issue with this album, honestly, is just that I don't find many of the songs very memorable. They kind of just come and go, and by the time they're over, I've already kind of forgotten them. In particular, the ballads on here I don't find very interesting at all. I think there's too many of them, and I don't think any of them compare to the classic ballads that the band released in the 70s and 80s. That said, though, there are still a few notable tracks on here that I feel deserve a mention. Don't Shut Me Down, I thought was a pretty catchy song. I think it has a great lead vocal from Agnieszka. I think her voice still sounds really good on it. And it has solid production as well. It's definitely one of the stronger tracks on the album. The song Just the Notion. This song was originally written and recorded in 1978 and was originally planned to be on Voulez-Vous, but it ended up being shelved for over 40 years before finally being released on Voyage. But personally, I'm really glad that this song did get an official release because I absolutely love it. It's honestly become one of my favorite tracks the group ever did. I love the bouncy melody, the production, the fun lyrics, and I think Agnieszka and Frida gave it really great vocals as well. And those vocals were actually recorded in 1978, but then I believe, re-recorded the backing track to make it sound more modern. So I think that this song really has the classic ABBA magic that a lot of the album lacks. And for me, it's easily the standout track on here. Besides that, Keep an Eye on Dan, I think is a solid track. I like the production on it, and the chorus has good energy, but still not one I really revisit often. And then No Doubt About It is okay. It has good energy, but the group has definitely done stronger rockers than that. So, yeah, overall, Voyage, I mean, I wanted to like it more than I did when it came out, but unfortunately, I just don't think musically it's their strongest effort. And yeah, it's kind of your typical comeback album where, like, you know, artists are trying to recapture the magic of old, but for me, it just doesn't really hold up to their classic material. But I don't think it's horrible, just pretty unmemorable.
Same, that's my number 8. So same reasons that you mentioned. Again, not a terrible listen, but like you said, it kind of just feels like a little declawed, kind of like we're trying to bring back the magic that was there in the 70s and early 80s and not really quite capturing it. I also thought Little Things was very strange to throw like a Christmas song on there. I'm like, I was listening to it, I'm like, what is this on here? Like, I just thought it was very random and didn't really fit. And I don't like mind Christmas music. I know that some people really hate Christmas music. I don't mind it, but I never really understood the point of throwing a random Christmas song on an album. Doesn't really work for me, but I do agree with the songs that you mentioned are very good. I quite liked I Still Have Faith in You too. I thought that was a pretty moving song. I know some people thought it was a little sleepy. But I thought it was pretty cool to hear that, you know, their voices still hold up pretty good. And it's kind of cool to have them back, like, you know, because everyone thought ABBA was never going to get back together. It's kind of like how a lot of people never thought Oasis was going to get back together, and yet here we are. But I kind of agree with what you said. It's just a little sleepy, and it just doesn't like in parts, and it just doesn't really quite capture the magic that was there back in the heyday.
Yeah, you're definitely not alone on Little Things. I've heard other fans say the same thing as you. It feels very weird and kind of out of place. It seems to be one of the more like disliked songs in the album. I don't mind it, but again, I don't really. It's not one that really clicks with me. It's like most of the other ballads on there. I think they're kind of just like whatever. And yeah, I Still Have Faith in You. I think some people like. I personally didn't do much for me. I definitely prefer Don't Shut Me Down, but you know, it's fine, whatever. All right, so number 8 for me on my ranking. I'm going to talk about an album you already talked about, Ring Ring from 1973. So like you said, this was the group's first studio album. It was originally credited to Bjorn and Benny, Agneta and Frida, but then on later re-releases, it was listed as being under the ABBA name. Even though I have this album ranked pretty lowly, I do still really enjoy quite a few of the tracks on it, and I'll take it any day over Voyage. Musically and production-wise, the songs here I think are pretty simple compared to what would come in the future. But you can definitely still hear the potential of the group on some of these songs. And you can already tell that Benny and Bjorn knew how to write a good melody even this early on. Unlike the group's later albums, this album features the guys' vocals pretty prominently, which makes it more of an interesting listen, although the girls are clearly the stronger singers. And as far as debuts go, I really think this is a solid effort, even if it is a bit inconsistent and spotty. So in terms of the tracks, I think Ring Ring is a really great opener. I think it has a really catchy melody. I love the piano on it, as well as the overall production. Really great vocals from Agneta and Frida, as always. Maybe a little bit repetitive compared to some of their later hits, but I do still like the song, and I can see why it was their first big hit in Europe. Another Town, Another Train, I think is a pretty solid track. Like the melody on this, and the lyrics have kind of that wistful vibe to them, which I like. And I think Bjorn does really nice vocal on the verses as well. Disillusion, I think, is a nice ballad that was actually written by Agneta. It's the only song in the ABBA catalog that was credited to her that was released on a studio album, which I think is interesting. But yeah, it's a solid track. I really like her vocals on the chorus as well as the guitar and piano throughout the song. And I think it's a solid early ballad from the group. People Need Love. This was their first single. It's catchy, but I have to say it doesn't do too much for me. Musically, I think Ring Ring is stronger than this. I think it's the stronger single. I Saw It in the Mirror. Not really a fan of this one. I think it's kind of boring and it doesn't really go anywhere. I think it's one of the weakest tracks on the album and probably in the ABBA catalog. Nina Pretty Ballerina is a pretty fun song. It has a very catchy chorus and great vocals from the girls. I don't think it's anything too mind blowing, but I thought it was pretty enjoyable. Love Isn't Easy, but it sure is hard enough. Has kind of a country rock sound to it. It's okay, but again, not one of my favorites on the album. It doesn't really do much for me. Me and Bobby and Bobby's brother. I actually really like this one quite a bit. I love both the verse and chorus melody on this. I think the arrangement is great with the strumming guitar and that little piano line that plays throughout the song. And I think it's a really great early vocal from Frida as well. And again, the song has kind of that melancholic, wistful vibe to it, which I really like. And yeah, I think it's one of the more underrated tracks on the album. And then after that, you have He Is Your Brother, which is decent, but I'm not too crazy about it. It has some nice moments, and the guitar is nice, but it's just kind of whatever. It's fine. I Am Just the Girl, though, is another one of my favorite songs in the album. I think this has a really pretty melody, and the vocals are just beautiful. Honestly, the harmonies in the song kind of remind me of the Mamas and the Papas a little bit. And I feel like this wouldn't have been out of place on one of their albums as well. So
No.
this is an amazing song, in my opinion. It's probably my favorite on the album. Rock and Roll Band is a fun closer. I like the sound of the guitar on it. It has a catchy chorus and another nice vocal from Bjorn. And then a couple of tracks I just wanted to quickly shout out. Santa Rosa was released as the B-side of He Is Your Brother. I think it's a solid rocker. Has kind of like an American influence sound. And I could see some Beach Boys fans maybe liking this one. And She's My Kind of Girl was included on international versions of this album. I think it's a decent track, and I think it's better than some of the tracks that made the album, but can't say I'm the biggest fan of it. So, yeah, overall, Ring Ring, I think it's a decent debut. I think it's definitely better than some other major groups' first albums. And I think that there's quite a few tracks I like, but the group would definitely do better than this in the future. So,
I'm glad you mentioned Mamas and Papas because I definitely got that vibe on quite a bit of it as well.
yeah, yeah.
Very folky. We are up to number 7, right? Waterloo.
Yep. Hmm.
Definitely a step up.
Yeah.
Still kind of finding their sound, but I think it has their first like really big monster hit in Waterloo. That's a great song. I love Honey Honey too. The one song that really surprised me was King Kong song. Was not expecting that. Really liked it. Never would I have imagined them to make a glam song like that, which was really cool. And I like that it had the guys singing on it too. I think you still kind of have the guys quite a bit on this album. But yeah, definitely I kind of like this one too because it's a little bit more rocky in parts, which I didn't really expect. But again, I still think they were still trying to find out their sound. They hadn't quite mastered it yet, but still a very enjoyable listen. And like I said, there were some things out of left field that I would not have expected from ABBA.
Yeah, so that's my next album as well, Waterloo from 1974. So like you said, Matt, this was their second studio album, and overall, I'd say it's a step up in quality from Ring Ring. I think the highlights on here are stronger than the highlights on their debut. Although I will say there's still quite a few tracks on here that I'm not too crazy about, particularly on side 2. But yeah, again, the guys' vocals are still featured pretty prominently on this album. After this, the group would really start emphasizing the girls' voices more, but on this album, the guys' voices still kind of shine. And in terms of the songs on here, I think Waterloo is an awesome opener. It's one of ABBA's best rockers. Has such great energy to it. I read that the production on this was inspired by Phil Spector's Wall of Sound, which you can definitely hear. I love the instrumental arrangement with the guitar, the piano, and the horns. And the vocals are really amazing as well. I can see why this song won Eurovision in 1974 and why it was a huge hit worldwide. I think it's one of the best tracks the band ever did. Sitting in the Palm Tree, the second track, not a huge fan of this one. Has kind of a tropical reggae sound to it, which, as you know, Matt, usually isn't my favorite thing.
Not.
I do really like the bridge section with the girls singing lead. I think that's very pretty. But besides that, the song doesn't do much for me, though I don't think it's too bad. King Kong song. I'm interested that you like this, man. I thought that was interesting because I've heard some fans say that they really don't like this one at all. They think it's one of the worst songs on the album.
Maybe
And
because I'm a big Bowie fan and it kind of has that glam vibe. Maybe that's why.
yeah, yeah, but yeah. So I've heard some people say they really don't like it at all, but I've heard others say they do like it. So it seems to be a pretty divisive song among the fan base. For me personally, I used to not care for it too much, but it has grown on me quite a bit over time. I think it has a very catchy melody, and I really like the piano and the guitar on it. I kind of can appreciate some of the quirky vocals on this too, although I can see why some people might find them annoying. I will say I'm not too crazy about the backing vocals during the chorus, like the bow, bow, bow. I think I probably could have done without that. But yeah, I wouldn't say it's a highlight of the ABBA catalog by any means, but I do think it's a fun song, and I can definitely see the charm in it. Hasta Mañana, I think, is a really pretty acoustic ballad. I love Agneta's vocals on this. I think they're very longing and emotive. And yeah, I think it's just a very well-written song. Also, maybe this is just me, but this song has always reminded me a little bit of that song Tie a Yellow Ribbon Around the Old Oak Tree by Tony Orlando. which actually came out the year before Hasta Manana. So I'm kind of curious if Benny and Bjorn had heard that song and then were inspired by it to write this one. But regardless, I think this is a really great song. And I think it's one of my favorites on the album. My Mama Said has kind of a funkier sound to it with the guitar and bass, which I think is pretty cool.
I like
And I
that.
like the keyboard on it as well. I think it's a solid song. I wouldn't say it's one of my favorites on the album, but definitely a unique style for them to do, especially this early on.
Funky.
Dance While the Music Still Goes On is a pretty solid song. I like the melody and the group vocals on this. Also has kind of a melancholic lyric, which I like as well. Honey, Honey. I know this song is kind of cheesy lyrically, but I'm with you, Matt. I absolutely love this one. It has a really infectious melody, and I love both the verses sung by the girls and that bridge section sung by Bjorn. I think they both do a great job. And I also really like the production on this song. I think it's one of the best sounding tracks on the album, and it's easily one of the highlights for me. Unfortunately for me, though, this album kind of falls off a bit after this. Watch Out has some cool guitar and keyboard on it, and I like the vocals. They're very like intense sounding, but musically, I think it's one of the lesser songs. What About Livingstone? Same thing. I don't think it's bad, and I like the bouncy piano on it, but it doesn't really do a lot for me. Gonna Sing You My Love Song. Again, not bad. I do like Frida's lead vocals on this, but as a song, it doesn't really click with me. I think it's just an okay ballad. And then Susie Hang Around. This is the only song in the ABBA catalog that Benny sings lead on. I think it's okay, but like the others, not super memorable for me. And then the American version of this album closes with a remix of Ring Ring, which has some added horns during the chorus. I think this remix is fine, but I probably would say I prefer the original version from the Ring Ring album. So, yeah, overall, I agree with everything you said, Matt. I think this is a step up from their debut, but still a bit inconsistent. And I do think there's some songs on here that aren't the strongest, but also the highlights on here are already really high. And you can definitely see the band's potential growing already by this point. So, solid second effort, but not too spectacular overall.
So next for me is ABBA 75. Is that what you usually refer to as? Because I
Yep,
know.
just yep, yep.
Yep, so ABBA 75 opens up with Mamma Mia, which is arguably their most famous song because it's a musical. And that's actually the first time, one of my first experiences with ABBA was actually that movie. I know you mentioned you're not a huge fan of it, but that I think was a gateway for a lot of people. I also really, really enjoy SOS. I do. And I really thought that was kind of cool. They had that little instrumental number on there, which is kind of interesting. Wouldn't really expect that from ABBA. So I definitely think this is another step up. They're starting to kind of solidify the sound. Um, and definitely you can hear the basis of like where the sound was really going to go. So yeah, that's number what number was that? Number 7 for me.
I believe
Six.
it's number.
Cut that out. That was number 6 for me. ABBA 75.
All right, Matt. So it seems like we have a lot in common with our rankings here because that's my number 6 as well. I have a 75. So yeah, this was the band's third studio album, and I agree with you that it's another step up in quality from the band's first two records. There are a few tracks on here I don't particularly care for, but I think overall there's a lot more highlights. And there's plenty of songs in here that I regularly come back to. The opening track, Mamma Mia, like you said, it's one of the band's most popular songs. I really love the intense opening with the marimba and the guitar. And I also really love the pre-chorus, the just one look and I can hear a bell ring. I really like that a lot. I wouldn't say it's one of my all-time favorite ABBA hits, but I definitely think it's a strong song, and it's one of the highlights of the album for sure. The next track, Hey Hey Helen, is another kind of like glam rock style song. I think it's okay, but it doesn't really blow me away. I don't really come back to it often. Tropical Loveland. This one kind of reminds me of Sitting in the Palm Tree from Waterloo, and that it kind of has that reggae influence sound again. Unsurprisingly, not too crazy about this one either. I think it's one of the weaker songs on the album, and I don't really find that much appealing about it besides the girls' vocals. Again, not a bad song. I think it's listenable, but I just don't find it very memorable. But then after that, you have SOS, which is one of my favorite ABBA songs. I think this song is perfect from start to finish. I love the opening piano riff. I love Agnieszka's emotive vocals on the verses. I think she really sells the lyrics well. And I really love the chorus too. I think the song is just super infectious and catchy, and it's one of the band's most memorable hooks. I also wanted to mention that I think the production on this song is awesome as well. Again, it kind of has that wall of sound effect going with the instrumentation, which I think really enhances it and gives it more power. And yeah, I think this is just a top-notch song, and I think it really shows how talented Benny and Bjorn are as songwriters and producers. I think they did an excellent job with this, and one of the highlights of the entire ABBA catalog, in my opinion. After this, you have Man in the Middle, which is another one of ABBA's early funk-sounding songs. I don't think it's bad, but I'm not a huge fan of this one, and I would probably say it's one of the weaker tracks on the album. Bang a Boomerang is a pretty enjoyable song. I think the chorus is catchy and fun on this one, even if the lyric is kind of silly. I wouldn't say it's a highlight of the ABBA catalog, but I do think it's one of the stronger tracks on the album. I do really like the song quite a bit, actually. Musically, I don't think this is quite as strong as some of their other hits, but I have to say I am a sucker for the saxophone on this. I really like that a lot. And I also really love the melody, especially that chorus bridge section, the "Oh, I've been dreaming through my lonely past" section. I really like that a lot. And yeah, the song maybe it's a little bit of a guilty pleasure, like "Honey, Honey," but I have to say I do really like it, and it's one I do come back to quite a bit from this album. After that, we have "Rock Me." This is another kind of guilty pleasure song for me. I know some people aren't too crazy about Bjorn's vocals on this one and find them grating, which I do get. But I have to be honest, I actually do really like them, and I think it makes the song more fun and memorable. I think it has a really catchy chorus, like a lot of the other songs in the album, and I love the bouncy piano as well. Again, maybe not the strongest song musically, but I do think it's a lot of fun, and it's one of my favorites on the album. Intermezzo number one. This is the song that you were referencing, Matt, the instrumental. It's one of the only instrumentals the group ever recorded, which is interesting because ABBA's known for their vocals pretty much. They're not really known as a group that would do instrumentals. But I actually really like this one quite a bit. I think Benny and Bjorn did a great job arranging it. I love the combination of the classical music elements with the guitar and synth. And it actually reminds me quite a bit of some of the early ELO stuff from the early 70s, which I think is pretty cool. And yeah, I think this is another cool track, and I think it really shows Benny and Bjorn's talent as songwriters and producers, even this early on. The next track, I've Been Waiting for You. I think this is a really strong ballad. I think it has a very pretty melody, and I love Agnieszka's vocals on this. I think she sings it really beautifully. I also really love that dreamy synth and guitar on this. I think it really adds a lot to the song, and I think it's one of ABBA's most underrated ballads. And then the album closes really strongly with So Long, which I think is one of ABBA's most underrated rockers. I think this song has awesome energy to it. I think the verses and the chorus really rip on this, and I love the driving guitar throughout the song as well. I know that there's some people that might kind of view this as a Waterloo rewrite, but I think it's every bit as good as that song, and I think it's a great way to close the album. I also really like the piano and horns at the end as the song fades out. I think that's very intense sounding. I think that's a great way to close the track. So, yeah, really great way to close the album. And then one track I wanted to shout out quickly, Crazy World. This is a track that did not make the album, but was recorded around the time that it came out. I think it's a nice melancholic ballad sung by Bjorn. I think it has a good melody, and I think it's one of Bjorn's stronger vocals. The last verse of the song is pretty cheesy. I won't go into why, but if you listen to the song, you'll hear it. But it's a very, very cheesy last lyric. But yeah, I actually wish this song had made the album. I think it's pretty decent, and I think it's better than some of the tracks that made it on. So, yeah, overall, ABBA 75, I think is a pretty solid album. Definitely a step up from their first two records. And there's definitely some of their greatest songs on here. And even some of the album tracks are pretty solid as well. So definitely an enjoyable listen.
Yep. And then okay, so number 5 for me was ABBA the album, which I think is the one 77. That
Yep.
one's kind of interesting because it's a bit more. Apparently, I'm reading that this was like for a movie or something. So
Yeah.
maybe that kind of explains why it's a bit more. It's a little bit more like art poppy than what you'd expect from them. Kind of like a little bit like almost progressive pop in a way. Um,
Hmm.
I think Take a Chance on Me is a classic. The Name of the Game is a classic too. I also really enjoyed Thank You for the Music and I'm a Marionette. Definitely hear them kind of experiment with kind of like almost creating like a suite of songs in there. And something I was just reading, and this is kind of interesting. Apparently, the Name of the Game was sampled by the Fugees. And that was the first time ABBA had ever allowed an act to sample one of their songs. Because I think they were not usually known for giving out samples too often. But that's really cool.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, I don't really have too much else to add just because again, still pretty fresh for me, but I ranked it at number 5 just because I think I kind of like where they were veering, but I like the other four better because I think those kind of four, the other four that we have mentioned, kind of form more of the core ABBA sound, where this was a little bit more out of left field. So like I appreciate what they were doing, but only it didn't really quite click for me as those four did.
Well, Matt, we're still on the same page here because that's my number 5 as well. ABBA, the album from 1977. So, like you said, yeah, this was released in conjunction with ABBA the movie, which was a comedy drama film that featured a bunch of ABBA songs, including some of the tracks on this album. Musically, I think this is a really strong record. I think there's a lot of really great material on it, and there's a good variety of tracks as well. I think all the songs on here are very distinctive from each other, so the album never really feels too samey like some other pop albums do. Production-wise, I think this album really sounds amazing as well. I think Benny and Bjorn did a really good job producing this, and I think their production skills only got better and better with each album. So the album opens with Eagle, which I think is a really cool opener. I think it's one of the most prog sounding songs the group ever did. I really love the synth and the guitar playing on this, and the girls' vocals really soar, especially during the chorus. And I also really love the instrumental solo halfway through the song. I think it's just a really well produced track, and I think it's one of the highlights of the album. After this, you have the big hit "Take a Chance on Me," which is one of the group's most popular songs today, and I can see why. It's a really catchy and upbeat track, and again, another showcase of Benny and Bjorn's talent as pop songwriters. And again, really great production on this, and I love the girls' vocals on it. I think they sing it really well. After this is the track "One Man, One Woman." I actually used to not be too crazy about this one, but it has really grown on me a lot, and now I do really like it. I love Farida's lead vocal on the verses, and I think the chorus is very powerful. I also love the backing vocals that come in during the second verse. I think they're very almost like Beach Boys-esque, which I think is cool. The name of the game, this is another one of ABBA's most funkier sounding tracks. But again, it's one that actually took some time to grow on me before I could fully appreciate it. I think the girls sound really great on this as always. I especially love Farida's part after the chorus. And yeah, I used to not be too crazy about the chorus, but it has grown on me a lot. And I think the production really elevates the song as a whole. And yeah, I do really enjoy it now, and I can see why it was a big hit. After this is the track "Move On," which I think is pretty cool. I'm not the biggest fan of Bjorn's spoken word part at the beginning, but I do really like the chorus. I think it's very like majestic sounding, very, very pretty. And the verses sung by Agneta are very pretty as well. Not a very well-known song outside the fan base, but I do really enjoy it. And again, I think it's a really well-produced track as well. After this is the song "Hole in Your Soul." This is one of ABBA's heaviest rockers. It has a lot of energy to it, but I can't say I'm the biggest fan. I do think it's probably one of the weaker tracks on the album. I know it's kind of a reworking of a song from the movie. I believe it's a song "Get on the Carousel." But even that song doesn't do a whole lot for me musically. So not my favorite track in the album, but I think it's okay. And then the last three tracks on this album are listed as part of the Girl with the Golden Hair mini musical, which is something that the band would perform live on their 1977 tour. So they would play all three of these songs together, I'm pretty sure. The first one is "Thank You for the Music." I know some people might find this one a little bit cheesy, but I honestly love it. I think it has a great melody and a great lead vocal from Agneta. I think it's one of her best lead vocals. I also really love the production on this track with kind of the layered vocals and the keyboard. And yeah, I just think it sounds really great, and I think it would have worked even better as the closing track in the album. After this is "I Wonder," "Departure," which I think is a decent ballad with a nice vocal from Frida. I do like parts of this track, but it's not one of my favorites on the album. And then after that is the closing track, "I'm a Marionette." This song is nuts. I saw somebody describe it as prog disco, which I think is a great description for it. It has really awesome production with strings and keyboard. And I really love that guitar solo halfway through the song. I think that's really cool. Also, really love the intense verses and the chorus on this and the really powerful vocals from the girls. I think they sound amazing as always. And yeah, I think it's a really strong way to close the album. I think it's a really cool, intense track. So yeah, ABBA the album 77. I think it's a really strong track. I'm kind of with you, Matt. I don't think it's quite as strong as the four that we ranked above it. But I do think it's a really strong album regardless, and some really cool tracks on it. A few that are really underrated in the ABBA catalog, in my opinion. So really strong effort.
Yep. Number 4 for me is Voulez-Vous. I know that's like probably their most disco-y album.
Mhm.
It's kind of cool to listen to. I quite like disco. I know that it kind of got a bad rep back in the day, but this is quite fun. Some great songs on here. Does Your Mother Know? I Have a Dream. Was it Chiquita Tita or
Chiquitita,
whatever?
yeah,
Yeah,
Chiquitita.
that one's fun. I really like how they embrace the disco sound. Of course, the great songwriting from Benny and Bjorn. And yeah, and then I also really like, and I know this was a bonus track, Gimme, 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 A Man After Midnight. I really enjoyed that one as well. Um, didn't rank it as high as some of the other ones just because I do like the sounds that they explore more on the other ones, especially I kind of like more of the synth pop work that we hear a little bit more on The Visitors and Super Trooper than the disco stuff, but I really did enjoy the disco stuff as well. I thought it was a very solid record, and that was my number 4.
All right, so finally our lists are getting a little different here because number 4, I went with The Visitors from 1981. So this album is considered by fans to be the group's most mature sounding album, both musically and lyrically. For that reason, it's also one of their most beloved albums by both fans and critics. A lot of the material on here, I honestly think you could consider it almost like art pop or progressive pop. There isn't really a lot of the catchy and upbeat dance music that the band is best known for on this album. And I think that that's reflective of where the group was at this time. Benny and Frida had broken up earlier in the year. So now both of the couples weren't together anymore, which I think caused more tension between the members. And yeah, the lyrics on this album are also very mature and reflective of what was going on both within the group and in the world at the time. Some of the songs on here are about breakups, loneliness and isolation, and even like Cold War themes like militarism and political persecution. And I think it's definitely ABBA's deepest lyrics that they've ever done on an album. But yeah, overall, I'd say this album has been the biggest grower for me in the ABBA catalog. I used to struggle with quite a few of the tracks on here, but I now enjoy the album pretty much as a whole, and I think it's definitely the most unique record that the group ever put out. So the album opens with The Visitors. I know a lot of fans really love this one and consider it one of the highlights of the album, but I'll admit it has been a bit of a grower for me. The song does take a bit to get going, but by the time it reaches the first chorus, I'm fully enjoying it. I think it has really great production from Benny and Bjorn, and maybe some of the most interesting lyrics the group ever wrote. I didn't know Bjorn has said that this song was written as a protest against Soviet persecution during the Cold War, which I thought was really cool. And yeah, the song has a very dark underlying sound to it, which is something that is seen on other songs in the album as well. So, very cool way to open the album. Again, still a track that's kind of growing on me at this point, but I do think it's a really strong way to open the album. After that is the track Head Over Heels, which I think is a really catchy synth pop track with a really great lead vocal from Agnieszka. Again, the song is kind of like a foreboding sound to it, and it's another song that really shows the band maturing musically. I don't think it did too much as a single when it was released, but I still think it's a really great song and one of the highlights of the album. After this, you have the song When All Is Said and Done, which is another song that was inspired by real life events, this time Benny and Frida's breakup. I think lyrically, the song is very moving, knowing the subject matter. And again, really great production from Benny and Bjorn on this. I wouldn't say it's quite as great as some of their other breakup songs, like Knowing Me, Knowing You, and The Winner Takes It All, but still a really strong track. After this is the song Soldiers. Like the title track, this is another protest song. This one, it was written against militarism. I really like this song a lot now. It took some time to grow on me, but I do really like it now. I love the melody, and I think the production on this is amazing. I love the blend of synth and guitar. And again, it has like a very atmospheric sound to it, which I think is very cool. And yeah, I consider this one of the highlights of the album, and it's one of my favorite ABBA deep cuts. I think it's a really cool track. After that is I Let the Music Speak. I kind of view this as like a darker, more intense sounding Thank You for the Music. The lyrics are both about music in both of the songs and kind of like the love and appreciation that we have for music. I don't like this song quite as much as Thank You for the Music, but I do think it's pretty strong. I think Frida gives it a really great lead vocal. After this is the track One of Us, which was the band's last #1 single. I think this is a really great track and one of my favorites on the album. I love Agnieszka's vocal on this, especially on the Wishing She Was Somewhere Else Instead line. I think she really sings the hell out of that. Yeah, it's a very emotive vocal, and I think she really sells the sad and melancholic lyrics of the song. So I think it's one of the most moving songs the band ever recorded, and it's one of my favorites on the album. After that is the track Two for the Price of One. I know some people take issue with this one because of the lyrics, particularly the last line, but I still enjoy it. I think it has a really catchy chorus and a nice lead vocal from Bjorn. Honestly, I kind of think the guys were just having fun with this one. I don't think it's meant to be taken too seriously, and I think it's really one of the only lighthearted moments on the album. So in that way, it's kind of refreshing in a way. I wouldn't say it's a highlight of the album by any means, but I do still like it. I think it's a fun track. And then after that, we have the track Slipping Through My Fingers. This is another one of the highlights of the album for me. I think it's another one of the most moving songs the band ever recorded as well. And yeah, musically, I think the song is really beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. I love Agnieszka's vocals on the verses and chorus. And that guitar solo at the end is very emotive as well. So really amazing song, another one of the highlights of the album. And then the album closes with Like an Angel Passing Through My Room. This is probably my least favorite song in the album. I think Frida's vocal is nice, but musically it doesn't really go anywhere. I think I read that even the guys weren't really that thrilled with it. I think that they wanted to do more with it than what they ended up actually putting out. But overall, really strong album. And then I did want to shout out a couple of other songs that came out around the time of this album. So first off, The Day Before You Came. This was released as a single about a year after The Visitors was released. And this is another one of those songs that's really grown on me over time. I love how atmospheric the sound of this is with the synthesizers and those really haunting backing vocals from Frida. And I think Agnieszka's lead vocal is really moving as well. And I think it has some really strong lyrics, probably some of the best lyrics the band ever wrote. And yeah, it's a really cool atmospheric track. And then the other song I wanted to quickly mention, Under Attack. This was released a couple of months after The Day Before You Came, and this was the band's last new single for nearly 40 years. I know this song wasn't a huge success commercially, but I do really like it. I think it has a very catchy chorus and a great lead vocal from Agnieszka. And I also really love the bouncy keyboard and synth on this. I think it's a really fun track. And yeah, overall though, The Visitors I think is a really strong album. I think it's definitely, like I said, their most interesting album musically. Very dark themes and very different sounding from anything else the group ever released. And I think it's a very underrated record. It doesn't seem like a lot of people know this one outside of the ABBA fan base. But I think it deserves a lot more attention and recognition because I think it's really cool hearing them do a different style. So really like this album a lot.
Yep. I will say my thoughts for that one as we come up. Number three for me is Arrival. I think this is the first one where they really kind of like you start hearing the signature ABBA sound. It's got some great cuts on it. First of all, has probably one of the greatest pop songs ever written in Dancing Queen.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely one of the greatest songs of all time, period. Money, Money, Money is a great song. I really quite enjoyed When I Kissed the Teacher. Uh,
I
kind
like that
of,
one.
kind of cringy, but kind of cute and charming at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Very similar into the vein of some of like Brian Wilson's more out there songs. Uh,
Yeah.
the other one I really quite enjoyed was Tiger. I thought that one was kind of funky. Very
Mm-hmm.
interesting. But yeah, I really like this one because like I think this is like where you start hearing the solidification of the ABBA sound. Another one I want to mention too wasn't on the album, but Fernando was released as like a single beforehand. One of my all-time favorites by ABBA. That is a beautiful song. I actually first found that one from Malcolm in the Middle, actually, which is also where I first found Take a Chance on Me. So they used some ABBA on there too. But yeah, I really like this one because I think it's kind of like you kind of start hearing where the ABBA sound starts forming together. It's a lot of great cuts on there. And again, just those great melodies and those great vocals, just what you expect from ABBA. So Arrival is my third favorite ABBA album.
Yeah, you pointed out some of my favorite songs on there, so I'm glad you enjoyed some of those deeper cuts as well.
Mhm.
So number three for me, it's not Arrival, but it's another one that's also in your top three, Super Trooper from 1980. So yeah, this was another hugely successful album for the group. It was their sixth number one album in the UK, and it was the best-selling album of the year there as well. Like most of their albums, this one features some really catchy pop songs, but many of the tracks also have a more mature sound musically and lyrically, which is something that would carry over even more to their next album, The Visitors. And yeah, I think this album really shows Benny and Bjorn taking another step forward as both songwriters and producers. I think it's a really strong album from start to finish. The album opens with the title track, Super Trooper, which I think is a strong opening track. I really like Frida's lead vocal on this, as well as that little keyboard part that keeps repeating throughout the song. I really like that a lot. I will say the chorus of this one used to not do too much for me, and I still probably wouldn't say it's one of my favorite ABBA choruses, but I do still really enjoy the song. I think it's a strong way to open the album. After this is The Winner Takes It All. This is one of my favorite ABBA songs. I think it's a really heartbreaking ballad about the end of a relationship. I know Bjorn said that this song was inspired by the feelings that he had during he and Agnieszka's divorce. And I think it's one of Agnieszka's best lead vocals as well. I think it's a really moving and emotive performance from her. And yeah, it's just an incredible song. Definitely one of the highlights of the album for me. After this is the track On and On and On, which is a very catchy and fun song. I really like the production from Benny and Bjorn and the use of piano and synth on this. Also, the backing vocals during the chorus of this song are very Beach Boys influenced. And particularly, they sound like the song Do It Again. And because of this, Mike Love decided to cover this song on his legendary solo album from 1981, Looking Back with Love. Mike's version of the song isn't terrible, but I wouldn't say it's great either. And it definitely pales in comparison to the original. But overall, though, it's a fun song, and I think it's one of the catchier tracks on the album. After this is the track Andante Andante. This is a slower love song. I like the production on this one, but I have to say musically it doesn't do too much for me. I do think it's one of the lesser tracks in the album. After this is the song Me and I, which I think is really great. It's one of my favorites on the album. I think it has a super catchy melody, and I really love the synth-heavy production on this, paired with Frida's lead vocal. I think she sings it really well. And yeah, pretty interesting lyrics on this one too. It's kind of about like having split personalities. And this is another example of a song that really shows how ABBA's lyrics really started to mature around the time of this album. And yeah, I think the song is a great example of that. So awesome song, very underrated in the ABBA catalog, and one that I think deserves more recognition. So after this is the ballad Happy New Year. I think this is a really moving and uplifting song. I used to not be too crazy about it, but it has grown on me a lot over time, and it's now one of my favorite tracks on the album. I think it's a really beautiful melody from Benny and Bjorn, and I think the lead vocal from Agnieszka is really great as well. And yeah, it's a great song to play around New Year's. I see why in a lot of countries it's a popular song around New Year's time because I think it's a really pretty and moving song. After this is Our Last Summer, which is another really amazing song. I love the melancholic lyrics of this, sung by Frida. And again, really great production from Benny and Bjorn as well. I love the electric guitar that comes in towards the end of the song. I think it makes it even more powerful. And yeah, it's just a very moving track. I love it. Then after that is the song The Piper. This is a song I used to not care for too much, but it has been growing on me recently. I do really like the production on this track, especially during the verses. I think it has a very atmospheric sound to it, which I really like. And lyrically and musically, I think the song is kind of a preview of some of the material that the group would do on The Visitors. I think it actually could have fit in on that album pretty well. After this, we have the track Lay All Your Love on Me, which is an amazing dance pop track. One of the highlights of the ABBA catalog, in my opinion. I think the production on this song is incredible. I love the way that the vocals sound, especially during the chorus. It's almost like very like church hymn like. I think that's really cool. And yeah, this is another song that really shows Benny and Bjorn's talent as songwriters and producers. I think it's really sounds really great, and I love the use of synth on it as well. And yeah, I think it's an awesome song, very atmospheric, and I think it's one of the group's very best. But then the album closes with The Way Old Friends Do, which is a live recording from 1979. I have to say, I think this is a pretty weak way to close the album. I don't really know why this is on here. I don't think it's bad, but I don't think it's near as strong as most of the other material on the album. And it's not really something I would ever listen to outside the context of the album. So other than that, though, I just wanted to shout out one other track, Elaine, which is the B-side of The Winner Takes It All. I think this is a really cool track, actually. I love the verse melody, and the production is really great as well. I honestly would have much preferred this to make the album over The Way Old Friends Do. I think it definitely would have fit in better, and I think it's a really cool, underrated track. So, yeah, Super Trooper, I think, is a really cool album. A lot of really great tracks on here, and not a lot of skips either. I think it's almost perfect from start to finish, and some of the most moving songs the band ever wrote on here as well, like The Winner Takes It All and Our Last Summer, Happy New Year. So, very strong album from start to finish, and a lot to like.
That's my number two as well. Number two, mainly for the same reason you said, it's very moving. I like the synth pop that they were heading towards because they kind of, one thing I kind of noticed with ABBA is they kind of realized where trends were heading and they did a really good job of kind of staying ahead of the trends. So they realized the disco was kind of dying out, so they moved more towards the synth pop thing. I definitely agree. Like the lyrics are very mature. The songs are just like heartbreaking in parts. There's definitely like you can kind of see like they're starting to put more emphasis on the lyrics, which I really appreciate it. The Winner Takes It All is my sister's all-time favorite ABBA song, one of her songs. So I agree with you. Beautiful song.
Yeah.
Lay All Your Love on Me is great too. On and on and on. Happy New Year. Yeah, it's just a really solid album, a great album from start to finish. And like I said, I'm a big synth pop guy, so I really liked that. And I did like that they kind of, you could see they were kind of putting more emphasis on the lyrics. As far as The Way Old Friends Do, I guess it's kind of cool as a novelty because it was recorded live. It's got that going for it at least.
Yeah. If they were going to put it anywhere on the album, I guess it makes the most sense to put it at the end, but I just don't know why it was included in the first place. Like, it's just kind of weird. It's like you said, it's a live track, so it's kind of just like a novelty. And yeah, I just think they had the song Elaine, which I think is a better song musically. I think it would have been a much better fit on the album. So, but
Yeah.
it is what it is.
I was gonna say what's really interesting though is that they were, and just looking at like kind of when I was researching ABBA, they were a lot bigger in Europe than they were in the United States. I
Yep.
wonder if that's just because maybe they're very Euro pop, and I know that Euro pop has always been kind of one of those things that's been kind of over here. What you often used to see, not used to see, but what you used to see a lot was a lot of times when you had acts that started in Europe, when they used to come over to America, they would modify the albums to make them more appealing to an American audience. And they never really did that with ABBA, but you saw that with like Milli Vanilli, for example. And I know, yeah, Milli Vanilli, but seriously though, they took some of the songs that were very Europop on the original version and they replaced them with a lot more like R&B, soul heavy stuff that appealed more to the American market. They did the same thing with the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC because they originally started in Germany. And if you listen to some of their European albums that they started with, very Europop heavy, very techno, and they took a lot of that out and replaced it with a lot more like R&B soul stuff that appealed more to an American market. So I wonder if that's the reason why ABBA seemed to not really be
Uh,
as popular in the United States. And also, too, I noticed a lot of their albums weren't released until way later in the States as well.
I would guess you're probably right on that because there's other like Euro pop groups that also didn't really seem to have the success in the US. I know the group Boney M was like huge overseas, like just massive.
Yeah,
But here it's like other than Rah Rah
very
Rah,
cool.
you don't really there's not really that many songs you ever hear from them, because they just never really made it over here. So, and even ABBA, I mean, they still had some hits here, but I mean, yeah, when you compare the chart positions of their albums from overseas to here, yeah, they just never really seem to find the same success. But so the second, my second favorite ABBA album is Arrival from 1976. So this was the band's fourth studio album, and really this was kind of the album that broke them through worldwide and made them kind of global superstars. It went number one in many countries, and it even reached the top 20 in the US, which they hadn't really broken through there yet. So, huge success for them. And I can see why, because I think that this album is really strong. It has some of the greatest songs the group ever recorded. And I also think it's one of their most consistent records, and it has some really great deep cuts as well. So, the album opens with When I Kissed the Teacher, which is a really catchy, upbeat song. I really love the melody on this, especially the One of These Days part. I really like that a lot. And yeah, I think the arrangement is great, and I really like the strumming guitar and keyboard on this track as well. After this is Dancing Queen, which I'm with you, Matt. I think this is one of the greatest songs of all time. I love pretty much everything about it. Great vocals from both Agneta and Frida. Great production. I really love the blend of the piano, the synthesizer, and the strings. I think it's done so well. And yeah, just really great songwriting from Benny and Bjorn. They wrote a lot of amazing songs over the years, but I think this is the best of them all. I think it's just a perfect pop song. After this is the track My Love, My Life, which I think is a really pretty ballad. I love the dreamy production on this and the amazing vocals from Agneta. I think she sings it really beautiful. After this is Dum Dum Diddle. This song has some pretty stupid lyrics. And I think they did acknowledge that before, but I honestly love it. I think the chorus is like infectiously catchy. And I love that little synthesizer hook that plays throughout the song as well. Just a really fun track that I really do come back to quite a bit, despite the lyrics being kind of silly. After this is Knowing Me, Knowing You, which is another one of my favorite ABBA songs. I love the melody on this and the melancholic lyrics sung by Frida. I think it's one of her best vocals. I also really love the guitar line that repeats throughout the song. I think it really adds to the melancholic vibe of the track. And yeah, I think it's a really well-produced song. I think it's one of the best sounding tracks in the ABBA catalog, and I think it's one of the strongest musically as well. I think it's a really great track. After this is Money, Money, Money. I have to say, of all of ABBA's big hits, this is probably my least favorite. I think the verses are okay, and I think Frida sings them well, but the Money, Money, Money chorus doesn't do a whole lot for me. I don't think it's one of their best hooks, and by the end of the song, it starts to feel pretty repetitive to me. I know a lot of fans really like this one, but never been a huge favorite of mine, and I don't think it's up to par with some of their other hits. After this is the track That's Me, which I think is a really catchy and upbeat dance pop song. I really love the use of synthesizer on this and the bouncy piano. I also really love the bridge sung by Frida, the I Don't Believe in Fairy Tale section. I think that's really cool. And yeah, I think it's a really fun song, and it's one of the stronger album tracks in the ABBA catalog. I think it's pretty underrated. After this is the song Why Did It Have to Be Me? This is another one of ABBA's kind of 50s sounding songs with the saxophone and the guitar. Kind of reminds me a little bit of I Do, I Do, I Do with the production. I like this song. I think it has a good melody, and the vocals from Bjorn and Frida are nice. But it maybe would have fit in a little better on one of their earlier albums. It does feel a little bit out of place here compared to some of the other tracks, but I still think it's pretty enjoyable. After that is the track Tiger, which this is one of my favorite ABBA deep cuts. I think it's an awesome rocker. I love the intense verses and the guitar riff during the chorus. And some really amazing vocals from both Agneta and Frida on this one, especially that high note that they hit at the very end of the song. I think that's really powerful. And yeah, I think it's a great performance from them, and I think it's a really great song. One of the most underrated in the ABBA catalog. After that is the closing track, Arrival, which is another one of the few instrumentals the group ever did. This one doesn't really do a whole lot for me. I think it works okay as a closing track to the album, but it's not a track I would ever come back to outside of the album. And yeah, it's easily my least favorite track on here. But yeah, overall, really strong album. I think it's one of their very best that they did. It has some of their greatest hits, some of their greatest deep cuts. And also, like Matt mentioned, Fernando, which was released as a single. I think that that's a really great track as well. Very melodic, and I love the production on it. I think it's one of Frida's best lead vocals. So, yeah, overall, though, yeah, great album, and one of their very best, and one that I would recommend to any new listeners who are trying to get into ABBA.
Okay.
All right,
So,
number one album, Matt.
The Visitors.
I knew it. I knew it.
You knew it. Yeah, because kind of like what you were saying earlier. First of all, I just want to say one thing. This was actually one of the first albums that was digitally recorded, and I know that the original CD was one of the first CDs ever put out, and actually goes for a pretty penny nowadays because it's like one of the first like DDD CDs, like all digital. But other than that, what I really like about this, like you said, like kind of that art pop vibe, which I love. I'm a big fan of art pop. I really like the very melancholic, dark lyrics.
Mhm.
That's something that I really appreciated. I like that they're kind of going into like, anti militarism and talking about Soviet Union and the Cold War. But I also really like that like there's a lot of just like, breakup songs and just things that are like, you because kind of like reflecting what was going on in the band at the time. But yeah, like you said, the Soldiers and the Visitors, and when all is said and done, just so many great songs on here. And I just love the music. I love the lyrics. I never would have expected such deep lyrics from ABBA, but you're getting them here. The vocals are great. I definitely will definitely come back to this album again. I think it's just right up my alley. You got like the great pop, you got the great melodies, but then you also have like the nice lyrics and the great production, which is just everything I appreciate in great pop music. So that is why The Visitors is my number one. And I'm sure you probably had a feeling that was going to be my number one.
I did. I was like, as soon as Matt gets to the Visitors, he's gonna be like, "Holy crap! Like this is not. I did not expect this. Like with like the very dark lyrics and kind of the ambient sound of a lot of the tracks.
Oh
It's just
yeah.
a very different sounding album, but I feel like it's exactly like you said. It's like right up your alley for your taste. So
Yeah, because I mean, my favorite Bowie albums are Hunky Dory and Low.
there you go.
Yeah.
All right, so now for an album right up my alley. My number one favorite ABBA album is Voulez-Vous from 1979. So this is kind of ABBA's disco album, like you said, Matt. I know disco was at its peak in popularity at the time that this album came out. You had artists like the Bee Gees and Donna Summer, like really huge in the U.S. Something interesting about this album, it took quite a while for it to get finished. Benny and Bjorn were going through kind of a creative dry spell around this time, which was causing quite a bit of tension within the group. But what was interesting about this is that the dry spell ended after Bjorn and Agnetha split up towards the end of 1978. And then after that, all of a sudden, they started making a lot of progress on the songs. So overall, I would consider this the most consistent ABBA album from start to finish. I think it has excellent songwriting and production from Benny and Bjorn. And it's honestly one of my favorite albums of the 70s. I just love it. The opening track, As Good as New, I think is really great. Very disco influenced track. I love the bass line on this. I think it really slaps. And I love the use of strings as well. And I think it's another one of Agnetha's strongest lead vocals. I think she really sings the hell out of this song. After this is the title track, Voulez-Vous. I think this is one of the strongest tracks on the album. I love it. Very disco influenced production. I really like the horns on this, as well as that guitar riff that repeats throughout the song. It's almost very like Arabian sounding or Middle Eastern sounding, that guitar riff. I really like that a lot. But yeah, awesome track. And interestingly, it's the only ABBA song that was recorded outside of Sweden. The backing track was recorded in Miami at Criterion Studios, which is where the Bee Gees recorded some of their biggest hits of the late 70s. And it's also where the Beach Boys recorded part of the LA Light album. So
It's
I thought
also
that was a little
my
connection
favorite
there.
song. It's also where one of my favorite albums was recorded, Layla and Other Assorted Love Songs by Derek and the Dominoes.
Oh, was that a Criterion too? Oh, wow. Cool. After that is the track I Have a Dream. Used to not be a big fan of this one, honestly. I thought it was kind of a sleepy ballad, but it has grown on me over time. I think it's a nice acoustic track, and I like Frida's lead vocal on it, but probably wouldn't consider it one of the stronger tracks in the album. I also think it maybe goes on a minute too long. I don't think it needed to be nearly 5 minutes. I don't think there's enough going on to justify the runtime, but decent track. But after this is the song Angel Eyes, which is one of my favorite tracks on the album. I really love the melody on this one and the bouncy keyboard throughout the song. Amazing vocals from Agnetha and Frida on this as well. I think they really sing the hell out of it. And yeah, it's just really well produced, like the rest of the album. After this is The King Has Lost His Crown. This is another song that I used to not care for too much, but it's really grown on me over time. I really love Frida's smooth vocal delivery during the verses. I think she sings that really great. And I think the really great lyrics in the song as well. I think it's a very bittersweet and moving song. And the girls' vocals really sell the lyrics. So really great kind of deep album cut there. After that track is Does Your Mother Know? This is one of my favorite ABBA rockers. I think it has really great energy to it from start to finish. And it's interesting in that Bjorn sings the lead on this. At this point, the band had kind of realized like the public wants to hear the girls singing the lead. So they had mostly relegated the guys to just doing the production and some backing vocals and obviously the songwriting. But I think Bjorn does a really great lead on this. I think he has a great vocal. I have seen some people point out a couple of questionable lyrics in this song, but honestly, it's so fun and catchy. I don't really mind them. I've seen far worse lyrics in other pop songs. So really great and fun, catchy track. After this is If It Wasn't for the Nights. This is one of my all-time favorite ABBA songs. I love this track. I think it's one of the most underrated in the entire catalog. I love pretty much everything about it. The bouncy piano and bass line, the super catchy melody, the girls' powerful vocals, and the very like melancholic lyrics. I know that the song was written around the time that Agnetha and Bjorn split up, and I think the lyrics are very reflective of that. But yeah, it's an amazing track, one of my most listened to ABBA songs, and I think it's really kind of the hit that never was, in my opinion. I think that this song could have been a really huge hit had it been released as a single, but it ended up getting passed over for another song, which is the next track on the album, Chiquitita. So I think this was a really big hit for the group, and I can see why. I think it's a really well crafted song with the slower verse section that opens it, and then that very upbeat and catchy chorus after that. I also really like the outro of this song with the bouncy piano. I think that sounds really great, and it's probably the highlight of the track for me. But while I do think it's a great song and I do enjoy it, I wouldn't say it's one of my absolute favorites of the group's hits. There's plenty of other songs in the catalog that I come back to more than this one. But again, I do still enjoy it, and I can see why it was released as a single, even though I would have preferred if it wasn't for the Nights as the lead single. After this is the song Lovers Live a Little Longer. From what I've seen, this song gets kind of a mixed reception from fans. I've seen some people say they really like it, and others say it's the weakest track on the album. I probably fall somewhere in between personally. I think it has a really great funky groove to it, and I really like Farida's smooth vocals on the verses. But I have to say that Lovers Live a Little Longer chorus does start to feel a little bit repetitive by the end of the song, and it's probably what keeps me from coming back to this one as much as I do some of the other songs in the album. But that said, I do think it's a solid track, and I do really enjoy it in the context of the album, but I would also agree that it's one of the lesser tracks in the album. And then after this is the closing track, Kisses of Fire. I think this is an awesome way to close the album. I love how this song starts really quiet with that slow opening verse sung by Agneta. And then it just launches into that really upbeat and energetic chorus. I think it's a really great hook. Love the production on this song from Benny and Bjorn. I think they did a really great job, and I think it's one of Agneta's best lead vocals. I think her performance really elevates the song. I would consider this another one of the most underrated tracks in the ABBA catalog, and I think it's one of the first songs I'd use to show people that ABBA is a lot more than just a singles band. So really great song there. And then a few other tracks I wanted to mention. A couple of tracks that are listed as part of the album on streaming, but they were actually released as standalone songs both before and after Voulez-Vous came out. The first one is Summer Night City. I know that Benny and Bjorn have said before that we're not really crazy with the finished song and that it shouldn't have been released. But I actually do like it quite a bit, and I wish it had made the album over a couple of the tracks that did. It's very disco influenced, but the production is very heavy. Like it's very heavy and loud, louder than anything else on the album. I think this is a song I joked with you, Matt, is one of like the most obnoxiously loud sounding songs ever. Like it's just really, really loud. But I actually do like it. I think the lyrics are interesting too. They're a bit more suggestive than usual from ABBA. I think they even worked an F-bomb in at the very end. If you listen really closely, the last Walking in the Moonlight does not sound like Walking in the Moonlight. It sounds like something else. But yeah, really cool song. I can kind of see where Benny and Bjorn were coming from with their gripes about this song. There are a couple parts of it I think could have sounded a little better. But I do think it's a pretty enjoyable song, and it's worth a listen if any of our listeners haven't heard it before. And then, of course, I have to mention Gimme, Gimme, Gimme a Man After Midnight. This was released as a single about 6 months after Voulez-Vous. I wish the song had been recorded earlier and had been on the album, though, because I think it's one of the strongest tracks the group ever did. I love everything about this song. I think the production is amazing. I think it's one of the best produced songs on it. I love the keyboard, the melody, the vocals. I think it's just an amazing track, and I can see why it's one of the band's most beloved songs today. I think it's an absolute classic. So, yeah, overall, Voulez-Vous, though, it's one of my favorite albums of all time, one of my favorite albums of the 70s. I think ABBA and disco was a really great combination, and I wish that disco had lived on a little bit longer than it did, because I'd love to see ABBA do another album like this. But they would still go on to create really amazing albums even after this, even after disco had died. So really great album. Love it from start to finish, and one I would definitely recommend to anybody who's looking to dive into the ABBA catalog. I think this is a really great album.
Yeah, no, it definitely is pretty good. And actually, I mean, disco didn't really die. It kind of just became house music. That's really
That's true, right? Because you look at a song like Lay All Your Love on Me from Super Trooper, and that still has kind of the disco influence to it anyway, and that was released a little later. So all right, so do we want to get into our mini greatest hits draft, Matt, where we each will select songs to make up our little fantasy album?
our little 20 things. You want me to go first?
Yeah, why don't you start us off?
So I'll just start with Ring Ring, because that was, I know, their first like kind of big hit in Sweden. I think it's a good way to start it off.
Yeah, that's probably the best track to represent the first album. I would agree with you. All right, so I'm going to go with something from Waterloo. I'm going to go with the title track. I think it's a really great rocker, has really great energy to it. Love the production, and I think it's an awesome song. I think it's the highlight of that album. So definitely a good one to represent that album.
I'm gonna go with another one from Waterloo. I know you said it's kind of a polarizing song, but I'm gonna go with King Kong song just because it's so different. It'd be a really cool one to put on there, just so people see that ABBA is a lot more than you might think.
Wow, that's an interesting. Wow, all right, cool.
I
No, I
really
love.
liked it. I like listened. I'm like, what the hell is this? I'm like, Jake didn't tell me about this. This is pretty
No,
cool.
no, I love it, man. Because the last thing I wanted to do was just make like another ABBA Gold. I wanted to have some variety in this thing. So that's awesome. All right, so I'm gonna go with. I got to think about this. Because I want to make sure I get some of the other songs. Okay, I'm gonna go with SOS. From ABBA 75. I think this is a really amazing song. One of the best tracks they ever did. Love everything about it. Love the production. Love the piano. Love Agnieszka's lead vocal. Yeah, just an amazing pop song.
Also from ABBA 75, Mamma Mia. It has to be on there. I mean, that is like the song. That's like probably like I would say that that's probably just because of the musical, probably one of their most well-known songs, if not their most well-known song. But it's just such a great pop song too, you know?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. All right, so I'm gonna get the obvious one out of the way now from Arrival, "Dancing Queen." It's the song to me that really defines ABBA. It's just a perfect pop song, one of the greatest songs ever written. And yeah, it's just an absolute banger of a track. So has to be on the album.
For my fourth, Tiger from also from Arrival. Just
Oh
'cause
yeah,
it's another one that's just really out there. It's really like it's such a good rocker. It's a cool lyrics too, and it's just something that's different that you probably wouldn't expect to hear on this. And like you said, we don't need another ABBA goal. Let's
hell yeah,
throw
hell yeah.
some more out there stuff on there. Why don't we?
All right, so I'm gonna go with another song with "Animal" as the title. I'm gonna go with "Eagle" from ABBA the album. I think this is a really cool kind of prog sounding song, like I mentioned, and a really cool kind of deep cut. I know it was released as a single, but I don't think too many people really know it today outside of the ABBA fan base. So I think it deserves more attention. So I think it's a really great track, and like I said, one of the proggiest sounding tracks the band ever did.
I'm gonna go back a minute just because I really want this one on there. Fernando, because it's one of my
Mhm.
favorites from
Yeah.
76. I just love it. I love the build up with like this, like kind of, I don't know if it's like like not really the strings, but like the woodwinds and everything. And just the chorus is awesome. And I love that song. So I really want Fernando on there.
All right, for the fifth track I'm selecting, I'm going to go with kind of a deeper cut, but it's the one that I think should get a lot more attention than it does. If it wasn't for the Nights, I love this song. I think it's a great disco influenced kind of dance pop song. Like I said, love everything about it. Love the melody, love the production, love the keyboard, and amazing vocals from the girls as well. So amazing song and a way to get a deep cut on our album.
I'm gonna go with Does Your Mother Know? For the same reasons you said. I really like it. I think it's a
Yeah.
cool, like little like rocker, dance rock kind of thing. And I like Bjorn's vocals on it as well. So that's my number six. Number
Yep.
six.
Yep, that's number six. I'm gonna go with "Gimme, Gimme, Gimme a Man After Midnight." I think it's one of the best songs the band ever recorded. Like I said, some of the best production as well. I think Benny and Bjorn did an incredible job making this song. And then one of Agnieszka's best lead vocals as well. So amazing track, one of the highlights of the catalog.
Winner Takes It All, gorgeous song. Has to be on there. I mean, it's such a heartbreaking song, but it's such a powerful song too. It's just like even though it's like one of those songs that's like it's very sad, but it's also kind of uplifting in the same way. Kind of like the same way I feel about like David Bowie's Heroes, where like it's a very melancholic song, but it has like it's just so uplifting too at the same time.
All right, I'm gonna go with. I'm split. I'm kind of split between two. Uh, All right, I'm gonna go with "Lay All Your Love on Me." I think it's a really cool song, really well produced. Love the effect on the vocals on it. Like I said, it's very like almost like church hymn like, and just yeah, really cool production from Benny and Bjorn, and another one of the highlights from the Super Trooper album. So great track.
So
All
for
right,
my
number eight for you, Matt. Number eight.
um, probably gonna go with When All Is Said and Done.
Mm.
Moving song, a very beautiful song, very heart-wrenching song.
Okay. Now I have to. I'm trying to pick what I want to nominate from the visitors. Because there's a few I really like on here. Um, you know what? All right, I'm gonna go a little off the beaten path. I'm gonna go with Soldiers. I think it's an awesome track. I think it's an awesome deep cut. Really cool production on this. Again, like very atmospheric sound to it, which I really like. And some really cool lyrics too, like very like anti-war lyrics. So really like that track a lot.
I'm gonna go with Under Attack for my ninth. It's a very cool synth
Woo!
track.
Yeah,
I really like that one. That one was another one too that kind of took me by surprise because I'm like, this is like almost like new wave synth pop kind of thing that's going on here. I really like that one.
yeah, yeah. If I remember right, I think Benny and Bjorn have actually slagged that one off a bit. Like they've been like, yeah, I think they said like well produced song, not a great song musically. That's what they said. But I think it's great. I love it. I'm with you.
Oh
Uh,
yeah, I really enjoyed it. Especially because it was like I'm like, this is pretty cool.
all right, I'm gonna go with down to my last two here. All right, I'm gonna go back a little bit. I'm gonna go back all the way to Arrival. I want to get the track "Knowing Me, Knowing You" on. Really melancholic song. I really love the lyrics. Love the little guitar line, and I think it's one of the best sounding songs in the ABBA catalog. It's one of the highlights from Arrival and one of the highlights of the band's entire discography. So really love that song.
And then for my last one, I'm gonna go with "I Still Have Faith in You." I know you're not the biggest fan of it, but I think it's a cool like full circle moment, kind of like hey, they came back after all this time. Nobody expected it, and I find it quite a moving song.
All right, I got to think here because now I'm looking at all these like backups I had written where I'm like, what do I want to pick? All right, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go with. We're going back even farther. We're going back to ABBA '75 for the closing track in that album, "So Long." I think this is a really great rocker, great energy to it. And I think it's again, like I said, I think it's every bit as good as Waterloo. I know some people consider it a Waterloo rewrite, but I think it's a really great kind of like glam rock style song with a great riff. Love the horns at the end. Think it's very intense sounding, and yeah, I just think it's a really fun and catchy song. So that's the last song I'm nominating for my list. So
I think we got a pretty good selection there. A good mix of big hits and deep cuts and quite a bit of stylistic variety too. I think that's one thing I will say, kind of me listening to this catalog. First of all, I want to say thank you, Jake, for being patient with me. I know it's still pretty new to me. I didn't have a whole hell of a lot to say, but I do appreciate you being patient with me on that. But I want to say, just listening to it, there's a lot more stylistic variety in their catalog than I would have expected. Just
mm,
because I think like when you're really just used to like biggest hits, like the Mamma Mias and the Dancing Queens, I think you kind of expect them to all sound similar.
right.
I really would say that kind of what I took away from listening to this is that there's a lot more stylistic variety in their catalog than I would have ever expected, diving in. So I kind of can see why you really like them so much, just because, like I said, there's the stylistic variety, there's the great melodies, there's the great vocals, the great harmonies. I think it's just everything that you really, great production. It's just everything that you really appreciate in music.
Yeah.
Knowing you for about a year now, and I can definitely see why you really like this group. And honestly, I can't wait to listen, really like deep dive, like not deep dive, but like really like listen to this stuff more and really let it maturate and, really like digest with me. And yeah, so definitely that was my main takeaway from this whole ABBA thing. So I'm really glad I did it.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you enjoyed a lot of the material and appreciate a lot of the deep cuts too. Because again, this is one of those bands that a lot of times they do kind of get like typecast as like a singles band. Like people view it as like, oh, buy ABBA Gold and you've got everything you need. But I couldn't disagree more. I think they have so many amazing tracks across their albums, especially those mid '70s to early '80s albums. I think those are just incredible. And yeah, just a really strong catalog, like you said, really great variety. They've got a great mix of really up tempo, high energy rockers, slower ballads, some really atmospheric sounding songs in some of their later albums. And yeah, they pretty much they did a lot of different genres, and I think they did a lot of them very well. And you can see how influential they are. I know a lot of artists have cited them as a big influence in pop today. And you can hear the influence in a lot of the songs you hear on Top 40 today. I think there's some of these Sabrina Carpenter songs I've heard. I feel like I can hear a bit of ABBA influence in them. And yeah, I just think that their music will live on forever, and I think that they're going to continue to influence artists for decades to come. So
I think it's safe to say if it wasn't for ABBA and their success, we wouldn't have had Max Martin and all of Sharon Studios and all of that shaped really popular music since the mid late 90s, if you think about it. I mean, it really started with are you familiar with Ace of Base? Like the
yeah,
sign?
yeah, yes, yeah.
So they were a lot of their stuff was produced by Dennis Pop, who was also Swedish, and they were actually Swedish, that group. And he was Max Martin's mentor. And then of
Oh,
course Martin got his start with a little group based out of Orlando, Florida, called the Backstreet Boys. And obviously the Backstreet Boys blew up, and then you had NSYNC afterwards, and then Britney Spears with Baby One More Time. And I think that a lot of what Max Martin did is not too dissimilar to what Benny and Bjorn did. I think the Swedes just have such a mastery of melody and
mm-hmm.
what makes great pop melodies. And I think what's also kind of cool, and I think they both kind of did this, is like they both kind of took a lot of American soul music and R&B and kind of like ran it through their own Swedish filter, and yet kind of created something kind of cool in the process. I think I hear that a lot with ABBA, and I hear that a lot with like a lot of the Max Martin stuff. So I think it's safe to say that we wouldn't have had all of the great Max Martin songs if it wasn't for Benny and Bjorn and ABBA.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with you on that too. Like I think of a song like from Voulez-Vous with ABBA, the song the King Has Lost His Crown. The verse melody on that sounds very like American soul influence, like very like '70s soul influence. I think you're definitely right on that for sure. I think that they kind of took the American influence and they kind of put it through their own kind of Swedish, like you said, Swedish filter and made it their own. So yeah, really cool. Before we wrap up here, I just wanted to mention two other songs we didn't get the chance to mention during this video. One is the song "I'm Still Alive" from ABBA live at Wembley, which was an album that they released, I believe, in like 2013. I think this is a really pretty song written by Bjorn and Agneta. Really great live performance of it as well. I wish that this was the song that was included on Super Trooper instead of The Way Old Friends Do. I think it would have been a better live performance to include. And then one other song I wanted to shout out. This isn't even technically ABBA, but the song "Man" from Agneta's solo album from 1983, "Wrap Your Arms Around Me." I think "Man" is an amazing song. I know Agneta wrote it as well. She wrote the melody and I believe maybe the lyrics as well. But I think it's an amazing track. I love the melody. I love the production. And I love her vocals on it. And yeah, if any of our listeners who haven't heard that one before, haven't checked out some of her solo stuff, definitely check out that track because I think that track's awesome. It's probably going to end up being one of my most listened to songs this year. I think it's really great. So, all right. So I guess we can wrap it up there. So thank you everybody for joining us for this special ABBA themed episode of Off Timin. I hope you all enjoyed the show and hearing us discuss this amazing group and all the great music that they put out over the years. So as always, if you like this video and would like to hear more, feel free to leave a like or subscribe to our channel. Your support encourages us to do more of these music discussions and rankings in the future. And it's also going to really help the second channel grow and get more attention. So thank you again, everybody, for listening, and we will see you all next time. Hasta mañana.